I never questioned where I came from. My childhood was simple, safe, and full of love, or so I thought. My dad was the kind of man who fixed everything around the house and always made me feel protected. Mom would always say we were a picture-perfect family, and for years I believed her dad. As I got older, I started noticing the small cracks in our family photo. Whispers between my parents that fell silent when I entered the room. Moments when my father's eyes seemed distant, like he was watching memories only he could see. Still, I brushed it off. Every family had its secrets, right? Nothing felt serious enough to dig into. It wasn't until my high school biology class assigned us a project on ancestry that the thought even crossed my mind. We were encouraged to try DNA kits, and my curiosity sparked. I thought it would be fun, a chance to learn more about our heritage, maybe even discover a long-lost cousin or two. My parents were surprisingly supportive, which made me trust there was nothing to worry about. A few weeks later, my test results arrived in my inbox. I was excited, clicking through the breakdown of ethnicities and genetic matches. But as I scrolled, something strange stood out. There was no paternal match. None of the connections listed anyone from my dad's side. I refreshed the page 3 times, thinking it must be an error, but it wasn't. My heart began to race. I sat back in my chair, rereading the results, trying to understand what I was seeing. How could this be? There was no trace of my father's lineage, no cousins, no distant uncles, not even a fragment of his DNA. I felt a chill creep up my spine as a quiet dread settled over me. I ran to my mom in a mix of confusion and panic, waving the laptop at her and demanding answers. She looked at the screen, her face draining of color, and sat down without a word. "There's something you need to know," she finally whispered, and I knew in that instant my life was about to change. My mom sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the floor like it held all the answers. I didn't know whether to scream or cry, but the silence between us said more than words ever could. I begged her to tell me what was going on. She took a deep breath, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Your father isn't your biological dad." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My entire world shifted in an instant, like the ground had cracked beneath my feet. "What do you mean? He raised me. He's my dad," I shouted. She nodded slowly, eyes full of guilt. "He is your father in every way that matters," she said softly. "But biologically, no." She began to explain that before she met my dad, she had been in a brief relationship with another man. It was complicated, and they weren't in a place to build a life together. When she found out she was pregnant, he was already gone, disappeared, without a trace. My dad knew all along and chose to raise me as his own dot. My head was spinning. So many questions fought for space in my mind. Who is this man? Did he even know I existed? Why didn't they ever tell me the truth? My mom reached out and held my hand, tears in her eyes. "We wanted to protect you. Your father never wanted you to feel different, but I did feel different now." Everything I knew about myself, about my family, had shifted. I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal, not just from the truth, but from the years of silence. I stormed out of the house, needing space, air, anything to make the walls stop closing in on me. My chest was tight with a grief I didn't yet understand. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a stranger in my own life. I couldn't even look at family photos the same way. They felt like a beautiful lie. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I turned to the one thing that had uncovered the truth in the first place, the DNA testing service. I logged in, heart pounding, hoping there was more information I hadn't seen before. Scanning through my matches, I saw a name that stood out, a man named David with a 50% match. My stomach dropped. According to the site, he was either my father or my brother. I stared at his name like it was written in flames, there was a message. Option, and my hands trembled as I typed. Hi David, I believe we might be related. I just discovered something about my family, and I think you might be part of that story. I hesitated before hitting send, then closed my laptop like I had. Open Pandora's box. All I could do now was wait. The hours crawled by, each second a punch to the chest. I kept checking for a reply, refreshing the page obsessively. Finally, late that night, I saw it, a new message. My heart skipped. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for I didn't even know what. His reply was cautious but kind. Hi. Wow, I didn't expect this. Can you tell me more about what you found? That was it, just a few lines, but it was a crack in the door. I replied with my mom's name, the year I was born, and that I had just learned the truth. A day later, his next message would change everything. He told me. I stared at David's message for a long time, trying to absorb what it meant. This man wasn't just a name on a screen, he might actually be my real father. The emotions swirled inside me like a storm. Anger, sadness, curiosity, and something close to hope. I had always felt a strange emptiness growing up. My mother had painted a perfect picture of our family life. She spoke of love, of sacrifice, of my father's unwavering support, but now I question everything. Was it all a performance? A story she told me and herself to protect a secret? Or was it just easier than telling the truth? I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I went down a rabbit hole, reading everything I could about David. His profile showed he lived 2 states away and worked as a landscape architect. There were photos of him with his family, 2 sons, a daughter, and a wife. A life built. Without me, I felt a strange mix of jealousy and longing. Would I have been part of that life if he had known? Would I have had siblings growing up instead of imaginary friends? These weren't just curiosities, they were cracks forming in the foundation of my identity. Every memory felt distorted. Finally, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I called my best friend Rachel and told her everything. She listened in silence, then asked one simple question. Are you going to talk to your mom? I knew I had to, but I also knew the conversation would change everything between us. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my mom and asked her directly. She finally set the cup down and took a long breath, her hands trembling slightly. I always meant to tell you. Someday, she began, her voice shaky, but I didn't know how. You were so young, and then the years just kept passing. I felt my chest tighten with the weight of hidden truths. My mind raced with questions. Why had she chosen to hide this? Did my father know I wasn't biologically his? Was my whole childhood built on a secret? The silence between us stretched, heavy and uncomfortable, as if the truth had taken up all the space in the room. She told me that David had been her college boyfriend. They had broken up before she realized she was pregnant. By the time she contacted him, he was already engaged. I didn't want to ruin his life, she said. And when I met your dad, your real dad, in every way that counts, he didn't hesitate to raise you as his own. I sat there, stunned. So many emotions clashed within me. Grief for the father I thought I knew, betrayal for being kept in, the dark, and a strange sense of compassion. Maybe she had done what she thought was best. Maybe she had tried to protect all of us from the pain I now felt. Still, I couldn't help but feel lost. Everything I thought I knew about myself had shifted in an instant. I was someone's secret. Someone's what could have been. My name, my face, my entire existence had been a quiet chapter in another man's story, a chapter he didn't even know existed. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, she said, tears in her eyes. You deserve the truth. I just didn't know how to give it to you. I nodded, unable to speak. Deep inside, I knew that from this point on, nothing would ever be the same again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, haunted by questions I never knew I needed answers to. Who was David? Did he know about me? Did he ever wonder what happened to the girl he loved back then? My thoughts spiraled. Into a whirlwind of uncertainty, I found myself scrolling through social media, typing his name into search bars, hoping for a glimpse of the man whose DNA I carried. I didn't know what I was looking for, exactly a face that looked like mine. A clue to his life? Something to ground me after the rug had been ripped out. What I found was surreal. His profile was public. He was older now, salt and pepper hair, and kind eyes that felt strangely familiar. He had a wife, 2 grown children, and lived just 2 towns over. I stared at his photos for hours, memorizing every detail like they might explain something buried. Inside me, I wanted to reach out, but fear paralyzed me. What if he rejected me? What if he had no idea I existed and didn't want to? Or worse, what if he had known and chose not to be part of my life? The questions were suffocating, but the need for answers only grew stronger. The next morning, I told my mom I had found him online. Her eyes widened with a mix of fear and guilt. "You're not going to contact him, are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded slowly. "I have to. I need to know where I come from." She didn't try to stop me. She just looked at me with tearful eyes and said, "Then be ready. Because once you open that door, you can't unsee what's behind it." I swallowed hard. I already knew that. But the door had been cracked open and I couldn't turn away now. I spent hours drafting a message. How do you tell someone you might be their child? Every version sounded either too clinical or too desperate. I deleted and rewrote it over and over, my fingers trembling as I hovered over the send button. In the end, I chose honesty. Double quotes, "Hi David, I know this is unexpected. I recently took a DNA test and your name came up as a match. I believe there's a chance you could be my biological father. I'm not here to disrupt your life, just searching for some truth." Then I hit send and sat in silence. The weight was unbearable. Every notification made my heart race. Hours turned into a day. A day became 2. I started to lose hope, convincing myself that maybe silence was his answer. I was preparing for rejection when a message finally appeared. His reply was calm, cautious. "Hi, this is definitely a surprise. I don't know what to say. Can we talk?" My hands shook as I read those words over and over. I didn't know what kind of conversation we would have, but at least he hadn't shut the door. We scheduled a call. The minutes before, it felt like waiting for a verdict. Would he be kind? Would he remember my mom? Would I feel anything at all? I sat on my bed, holding my phone like it might burn a hole through my palm, heart thudding. When his face appeared on screen, I froze. His eyes were exactly like mine. That's when the tears came, silent, overwhelming, undeniable. "I think you look like me," he said softly, and I nodded, finally hearing the words I didn't know I had been waiting for all my life. David and I spoke for nearly 2 hours. He was as stunned as I was, but there was a gentleness in his voice that reassured me. He told me about his younger days, where he had briefly dated a woman named Sandra, my mother. It was short-lived, a fleeting chapter. He had no idea she was pregnant. "If I'd known, everything might have been different," he said quietly. His regret wasn't performative. It felt sincere, like something he'd carried unknowingly. I could hear the weight settling in his breath. It broke something open in me. He asked questions. Where I grew up, what I loved, what I'd become. I told him about my art, my life, and how I always felt like something was missing. When I described my childhood, he listened closely, like trying to catch every part of what he had missed. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't awkward. It was strangely warm. as if two strangers had found a thread that tethered them across decades. At one point, we just stared at each other, not needing to say anything. The silence was full of meaning, not emptiness. After the call, I sat in the dark, trying to absorb the enormity of it all. My dad wasn't who I thought he was, but the man I just met felt like a piece I didn't know I needed. It was both surreal and grounding, like learning the truth finally anchored me. I didn't know what would happen next. Would he want to build something with me? Would I even be open to that? All I knew was, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a question mark. I felt like a sentence finally coming to its punctuation. The next day, I told my mom everything. I expected denial, panic, maybe even anger. But she sat quietly, her hands folded, eyes distant like she was watching a scene she had played out long ago. I always knew this day might come, she whispered. She admitted it. David had been a brief, passionate mistake. My biological father. She had broken up with him, discovered she was pregnant shortly after, and decided never to tell him. You deserve stability, she said, and your stepdad gave you that? I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why she had taken that choice from me. But all I managed was, you should have told me. Her lips trembled, and for the first time in years, I saw her vulnerability, not as a mother, but as a woman who had once been afraid. She apologized, not in a defensive way, but truly. I thought I was protecting you, she said, but maybe I was just protecting myself. Her eyes welled with tears, and I realized the secret had haunted her as much as it had confused me. We sat in silence, letting the truth settle like dust in a still room. I wasn't ready to forgive her entirely, but I also didn't hate her. I was beginning to understand the complexity of choices, of regrets, of love tangled in fear. That night, I looked at a photo of myself as a child. I searched for David's features in my face, and for the first time, I saw them. Not just in my cheekbones or eyes, but in the curiosity, the gentleness. I decided to contact David. I didn't know what I'd say, or if I even wanted a relationship. But I needed to hear his voice to see if something in me would recognize him. I found his business email, short, professional, but real. And I sent. The message. 2 days passed with no reply. Then one evening, a ping. His response was calm, cautious, but curious. He had no idea I existed. He asked if I'd be open to a video call. My hands trembled as I read it. My heart was a storm of nerves and hope. We scheduled a call. I stared at my screen, breathing hard, wondering if this would heal me or hurt me more. When the camera flicked on and I saw his face, my face and his, I couldn't speak for a moment. He smiled, unsure, gentle. Hi, he said. I think we have a lot to talk about. We spoke for 2 hours. He never married, never had other children. He asked questions about my life, not out of guilt, but out of sincere curiosity. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I felt whole. Like something missing had quietly clicked into place. Told me stories about his youth, his dreams, the books he loved, the music he played. And I saw so much of myself reflected back. It was surreal, strange, beautiful. For the first time, my identity didn't feel like a puzzle with a corner missing dot. After we ended the call, I sat in silence. Tears streamed down my face, not of pain, but of quiet relief. Over the following weeks, David and I continued talking, sometimes by message, sometimes video. We took it slow, no pressure, no forced labels, but every conversation peeled back a new layer. I began to see my story from a new angle, one that made sense. I told my mother I had spoken to him. She went quiet, then simply nodded. You deserve to know where you come from, she said. I could see in her eyes a mixture of fear and relief. Maybe she had carried the weight of that secret for too long. With David, it wasn't about catching. up on lost birthdays or holidays. It was about connection. Shared music tastes, similar quirks, the way we both tilt our heads when we're thinking. It was like meeting a missing half, not to fill a hole, but to understand its shape. One afternoon, I visited him. I stood at his door with a heart pounding like thunder. When he opened it, it was like seeing a mirror from 30 years in the future. He hugged me not like a father who raised me, but like a man finally meeting his truth. We spent the weekend talking, laughing, looking at old photos. He showed me a guitar he built by hand. We played together, laughing over off-key notes. There was no drama, no tears, just peace. A peace I never realized I'd been seeking. I left his house changed. Not because I found a father, but because I found a truth. And that truth didn't erase the pain or the years. It simply made them make sense. I was no longer. I returned home with a strange calmness. My stepdad asked if I was okay. I nodded and said, "I think I finally am." He smiled, unsure of what that meant, but he didn't press. He's still my dad, the one who raised me, guided me, and gave me love. I didn't need to choose between them. One gave me life, the other gave me roots. And in the space between both men, I found myself, not broken, not confused, but whole in a new, unexpected way. That's the power of truth. It sets you free. Later that month, I shared my story with a few close friends. Some cried. Some were shocked, but most just hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't just about the DNA test anymore. It was about reclaiming my identity. Sometimes life doesn't unfold in straight lines. It loops, bends, and doubles back. But every turn, every secret, every unexpected truth leads somewhere. For me, it led to understanding. And with that understanding came peace. Brenda. If you're listening to this and you've ever questioned who you are, don't be afraid of the truth. It might hurt at first, but it's worth it. Because once you find it, no one can take it from you. You become uncheckable in who you are. And if this story moved you, I invite you to subscribe. On this channel, we uncover hidden truths, untold stories, and unforgettable moments.